Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. When I started this channel, in fact, most people that start YouTube channels get the same advice. Whatever you do, don't read the comments. The reality is, for me, reading the comments is one of my favorite parts of this running a channel. You guys leave such good comments, inspire such good thoughts, that I often think it's a shame that they remain buried and all you get is a quick response from me. So what I started doing with these follow-up videos, where I pick out some comments that inspire new ideas, create new paths for us to follow, that sort of thing, and then put them and my response in a follow-up video. That's what we've got today. This is my follow-up to my previous video on my hot take on the new IWC Pilot Chronograph AMG edition. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, so let's get into my responses to your comments to my hot take of the IWC Pilot Chronograph AMG edition. Start with Mark Wheelers, who had quite a long comment with a number of parts in it, and so I'll respond to each part as I go. First off, he asks if my response to this watch was so visceral, surely that would carry through to any review I did later. And my answer to that is, in the first place, actually my response to this watch wasn't visceral. If anything, I was a bit kind of wishy-washy about it. I didn't have a particularly strong reaction to this watch. The second point I would say is, under no circumstances would I allow my first impressions of a watch to carry over to something I was going to call a critique or a review. You've gone on to ask me whether I would think that this watch the design was weak, medium, or strong. For those of you who aren't aware of that language, I've discussed that in a way earlier video. I'll put a card up to that. But to answer that question directly, I would call this a medium design. It's not weak in that the designers haven't shied away from the common trope of carbon fiber and titanium and everything. I think to not acknowledge that those are valid ideas for a Formula One inspired watch would be weak. It's not derivative of anything. So again, I don't see it as being weak, but it can't be considered a strong design. It doesn't carry, by me anyway, it doesn't really carry through. And that's come through in my whole ambivalence about this watch, really. So it ends up being medium, for better or worse. You shouldn't feel like I am damning this with faint praise. I am damning this with faint praise. You sum this all up by saying that you think it's a well-educated miss. It'll sell to some people, but on the other hand, it's kind of a C. I suppose my response would be, as they say, C's get degrees. You know, when you say that it's likely it's going to sell to fans of AMGs, and that's neither here nor there. That is not neither here nor there. That is a core requirement of a business that's intending to make profits. Moving straight to another very large comment, Howard starts by saying that the busyness introduced by the carbon fiber doesn't seem to work with a pilot's watch. Could not agree more. For me, it feels kind of forced and out of place. He goes on to say that he thinks we should perhaps have begun with a clean sheet of paper. Nice idea. Worry about what the price would be, though. That would be ferociously expensive for a one-off watch. Then there's a long part of Howard's response where he talks about how they should have gone back to a Jack Heuer, Gerd Lang kind of idea, heyday of Heuer watches, mid-60s, referencing sort of classic motorsports and old rally designs. And I could not disagree more. I think that would have been boring, derivative, and importantly, would have lacked any link to AMG or Formula One. I understand there is those kind of late 50s, early 60s watches are very popular. They're very nice. I can get why people like them, but that would have been hopelessly inappropriate for this watch. Nice short sharp one here from Stephen UK. Likes the watch but wouldn't buy it because it's got AMG on it. 1. Co-branding carries that risk. There's always the risk that maybe you produce a product someone likes, but it's associated with a product they don't like. You're going to be screwed. That's a risk IWC or any watch that co-brands takes. I will say though, I personally hate printing on clear case backs. I don't like it on this watch. It's one of my major bugbears with Grand Seikos as well. So I'm with you here, Stephen. Okay, so now I've got a grouping of 3 comments. There was actually a number of comments, but on these same thoughts from JSP, BBJ Rhino, Mr. Cassioke, often capturing the same idea. It feels a bit sterile, feels a bit lazy, it doesn't capture the spirit of IWC. Yeah, I agree with a lot of those, at least based on what we've seen here. It doesn't excite me, this watch. However, having said that, it's important then that we highlight the response from John, who is a actual in real life friend of mine, used to live a couple of streets from me, and I know is a guy with a serious set of watches and with some serious taste here. So given that he's seen this in real life and says it's actually a lot better looking in real life than it was in the renders and the photos, I would say this is exactly why I caveat my hot takes and why, whilst it's okay for us to have our opinions and our ideas, we've always got to be really careful that we should see it in real life before we either A, spend our money, or B, put a line through a watch and say we're not going to touch it. Okay, Ken starts by thanking me for my opinion and being quite different to the corporate standard enthusiasm for watches. You know what, Ken? I can't help it. Thanks anyway. But at the end of the day, I can only say how I think or feel about a watch. Otherwise, what's the whole point of this game? You then get a bit cheeky and ask me for a hot take on a watch I've never even seen before. But you know what? I'll give it a go. In response to you, I went and found that watch. And overall, my idea kind of aligns with yours. You know what? It does look nice. I do like the IWC Aqua Racer as a watch, but I agree with you. It feels a bit meh for something that's supposed to be a commemorative watch. And that price looks pretty steep to me. So my hot take would be nice watch, pleasant watch. Is it that nice? Is it that pleasant? Is it that special? It kind of goes back to my previous point. I'd really need to see this in the watch and fall in love, see this in the metal and fall in love with it. Right now, based on the little bit that I've seen, I'm not confident. Moving on, Marcus F has sort of pulled me up on the idea that IWC has been a bit shouty with this, a little bit in your face, reminding me that brands like AP and Hublot have actually been way worse from that point of view. And that is absolutely true. But on the other hand, when Hublot did it, for example, with their Hublot Ferraris, they went crazy high watchmaking. You can love this watch or you can hate this watch, but either way, you cannot deny that there is some serious engineering going in here. And either way, this is impressive in a way that the IWC was not. Perhaps the IWC's problem is it's kind of stuck in an uncanny valley. It's not subtle enough to really appeal, not crazy enough to really appeal, just sort of in the middle, an anti-Goldilocks, if you like. Marcus goes on to say that micro brands, in using things like carbon fiber weave, are actually just copying previous popular selling designs, and he remembers that carbon dials have been quite popular in the past. That is absolutely true, but as Ian Hoyle brings out, that this woven carbon fiber theme has kind of been done to death in those other uses and comes across as a bit faux, a bit kitsch. And I totally agree with you, Ian. I think that's my problem here. Okay, so the last comment I'm going to refer to is from Johnny Guitar. He begs to differ about my opinion on the fundamental, deep down, in the bones aesthetic appeal of this watch. I said fundamentally it's quite handsome, just a bit boring. He thinks that the disproportion between the case and the movement is blatant and it crams everything in towards the dial. Frankly, I've got to say, I disagree. I quite like the layout that we have now. In particular, I like that by having this layout, the numbers and the indices are all both present and intact. I also think it's a good use of all the dial. What you end up getting is all the indices, all the markers, and readable sub counters. What more can you ask for? However, Johnny Guitar's point that this arrangement does make the relatively small movement for the case size pretty plain, that is absolutely true. And my question is that even an issue though? I know some people really care about the idea that the movement and the case are paired, that they correspond in size, that a larger case has a larger movement, a smaller case has a smaller movement, there's no big fillers or anything. I'm unsure how I feel about that argument. Certainly when you start talking really high horology, Patek Philippe, Vacheron, I'm probably on board with that idea. One of the reasons I'm paying vast amounts of money for those watches is the idea that the movement and the case are all bespoke and developed for each other. Is that the case for a $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 IWC? I would never have considered it until Johnny raised it, and now I'm still unsure. On the other hand, maybe given that IWC is part of this much larger Richemont group, they have the ability to have movements in multiple sizes. Maybe the idea that a large brand within a large group are simply rehashing the same movement over and over again should bug me. I'm really on the fence about this one, and it's something that I might have to think about a fair bit more. So that was it. First off, I need to say thank you. This sort of video relies entirely upon you, A, watching me, B, you listening to me, C, you providing me feedback I can talk about. I love that you do it. It is one of my favorite parts of this running a channel. Hope you enjoyed this too. Let me know in the comments below, paradoxically enough, and we'll have a chat about it later. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches, and I'll catch you later. Bye.